It was a warm summer night when Julia Carter, a local real estate agent, arrived at Brian Donlevy's former Los Angeles home. She had been hired to evaluate the property for sale, unaware of the eerie reputation that had haunted the house for decades. The house, nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac, appeared ordinary at first glance, a modest yet elegant structure with Spanish-style arches and a red-tiled roof. But as Julia stepped inside, the air felt different, heavier, as though the house itself was alive and watching. She noticed it immediately, the faint, acrid smell of cigarette smoke. It clung to the air like a ghostly presence. Yet the previous owner had confirmed that smoking had been banned in the house for over 30 years. Dismissing it as residual odors from the past, Julia set to work, walking through the house with her clipboard and flashlight. The study, tucked at the end of a dim hallway, was her last stop. It was a peculiar room, with dark wood paneling and heavy vintage furniture. A leather chair sat behind an ornate desk, its surface scattered with dusty papers, as if someone had left in a hurry. That's when Julia heard it, a soft shuffle, like footsteps dragging across the floorboards. Her pulse quickened. She froze, straining to hear. The sound came again, deliberate and slow, as though someone were pacing near the desk. The study was empty. The house was empty. At least it should have been. Julia's rational mind fought to explain it. Maybe it's the old wood settling, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. But as she stepped closer to the desk, the faint smell of cigarettes grew stronger, stinging her nose and throat. She looked around, shining her flashlight into every corner. Nothing. She flipped through some of the papers on the desk, trying to distract herself. But they were nothing more than faded documents, receipts, letters, and an old ledger. That's when she noticed something chilling. One of the drawers was slightly ajar, as though someone had been searching through it recently. Her hands trembled as she opened it fully. Inside was a single yellowed sheet of paper with a name scrawled at the top, Brian Donlevy. A cold draft swept through the room, making her gasp. The footsteps started again, this time right behind her. Julia spun around, her flashlight beam shaking wildly, but there was no one there, just the empty study, the silent shadows, and the suffocating smell of smoke. She fled the room, slamming the door behind her. But as she reached the foyer, a horrifying thought struck her. She had left her clipboard on the desk. With dread pooling in her stomach, she forced herself to return. The study was quiet when she opened the door, but something was different. The chair behind the desk had turned, now facing the doorway, as if inviting her back. Her clipboard sat on the desk, but it wasn't where she had left it. It had been moved, deliberately placed on top of the yellowed paper with Brian Donlevy's name. Unable to stay another moment, Julia grabbed the clipboard and ran out of the house. She locked the door behind her, the metallic click echoing into the still night. As she reached her car, she glanced back at the study window. For a split second, she thought she saw a figure standing there, a silhouette of a man, faintly illuminated by the moonlight. A faint wisp of smoke seemed to curl from the figure's hand before vanishing entirely. Julia never returned to the house, and she refused to list it, citing personal reasons, to her employer. But the stories continued. New tenants reported the same smell of cigarettes, the same quiet footsteps in the study, and the same unsettling feeling that someone or something was still searching for something long lost. And every so often, late at night, a faint glow would appear in the study window, as if someone was still working there, the ghostly smell of smoke drifting into the Los Angeles air. Months passed, and the house remained on the market, unsold. Despite its charm and prime location, every prospective buyer walked away with the same uneasy feeling. Julia's experience, while disturbing, wasn't unique. The cleaning crew hired to freshen up the property had refused to return after their first visit. One of them, a man named Dave Peterson, told a chilling story over drinks at a local bar. He claimed he had been dusting in the study when he felt a sharp tug on his shirt. When he turned around, no one was there. Moments later, he heard the drawer slide open behind him. "I swear, I didn't touch it," Dave said, his voice low, as if saying it aloud made it more real. But when I looked inside, there was this old photograph, black and white, a man in a suit smoking a cigarette. His eyes, they looked straight at me, like he was alive. The photograph wasn't there when the cleaning supervisor checked, leaving Dave questioning his own sanity. Yet, he quit the job the next day, convinced the house was cursed. Eventually, the property fell into the hands of Alex Harper, a historian fascinated by Brian Donlevy's career and personal life. Alex didn't believe in ghosts or hauntings. He believed in facts. He purchased the house at a bargain price, intending to restore it to its former glory and turn it into a living museum. To him, the strange stories were nothing more than exaggerations, fuel for publicity, perhaps, but not evidence of anything supernatural. During the first week, Alex stayed in the house alone. He cataloged the furniture, examined the dusty ledgers, and even ventured into the basement to explore its hidden storage. The cigarette smell was there, faint but unmistakable, and while it unnerved him at first, he dismissed it as embedded odors in the walls. Then, on the fourth night, the footsteps began. It was just after midnight when Alex, working late in the study, heard the soft, deliberate steps echo down the hallway. He stopped typing on his laptop, the silence that followed pressing down on him like a weight. "Hello?" he called out, his voice steady but hesitant. There was no answer. He stood, stepping cautiously into the hall, his footsteps muffled by the old Persian rug. The air felt colder here, damp even, as though he had entered a different house entirely. As he reached the end of the hall, a faint whisper brushed past his ear, a single word, inaudible but chilling. Alex froze, his heart pounding, before forcing himself to turn around. The study door, which he had left wide open, was now slightly ajar. The soft scent of cigarettes drifted out, stronger than before, as though someone had just lit one inside. Compelled by equal parts fear and curiosity, Alex pushed the door open. The room was just as he'd left it, his laptop on the desk, the old papers untouched. But the chair had moved, turned once again toward the door, just as Julia had described. This time, there was something on the seat, a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Alex picked it up with trembling hands. It was a letter, written in shaky handwriting. "To whom it may concern, they took everything from me. I need to find it. Help me." No signature, no date. But as Alex turned the page over, he saw a faint, smeared fingerprint in what looked like ash. A chill ran through him, and for the first time, he couldn't rationalize what he was experiencing. The footsteps started again, this time moving toward him from the hallway. Alex's throat went dry as he backed away, clutching the letter. Then, as the sound reached the threshold of the study, the footsteps stopped. A voice, deep and gravelly, spoke behind him. "Do you know where it is?" Alex spun around, but the room was empty. The smell of smoke was overwhelming now, so thick it burned his throat. Panicking, he stumbled out of the study, the letter still clutched in his hand. As he fled down the hallway, he heard the voice again, low and menacing, echoing from behind him. "Find it, or I'll find you. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story." Alex didn't stop running until he reached the front door, his hands fumbling with the lock. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, the oppressive smell of smoke dissipated almost instantly. He stood on the porch, heart pounding, staring back at the house as though expecting someone or something to emerge from the shadows within. But the house stood still, silent and dark, save for the faint glow of the study window. He wanted to leave, to drive away and never look back. But his eyes fell to the crumpled letter in his hand. The words, "Help me," were burned into his mind, the desperate plea impossible to ignore. Against his better judgment, Alex decided to return the next day, this time prepared. The following morning, armed with a voice recorder, a digital camera, and a flashlight, Alex re-entered the house. It looked ordinary in the daylight, even inviting. The eerie sensations of the night before seemed like distant memories, but the letter in his pocket was a constant reminder of what had happened. He started in the study, methodically searching through the desk drawers and cabinets. Papers, ledgers, and old photographs were all he found, nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, as he flipped through a stack of aged documents, one caught his attention. It was a bank statement, dated 1956, showing a substantial withdrawal of cash just weeks before Brian Donlevy's death. Why would he withdraw such a large amount of money? And where did it go? Alex's historian instincts kicked in, and he knew he had stumbled upon something significant. Hours passed, and Alex was no closer to answers. Frustrated, he decided to take a break. As he left the study, he noticed something peculiar, a faint trail of ash leading from the desk to the hallway. He hadn't seen it earlier, and the sight sent a shiver down his spine. He followed the trail cautiously, the ash leading him toward the basement door. The air grew colder with each step, and the smell of smoke returned, faint at first but growing stronger the closer he got. When he reached the door, it creaked open on its own, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Alex hesitated, gripping his flashlight tightly. He pointed the beam downward, illuminating the dusty steps and cobweb-covered walls. The ash trail continued, disappearing into the shadows below. Summoning his courage, he descended. The basement was a labyrinth of old furniture, forgotten belongings, and crates covered in decades of dust. The ash trail led him to a far corner, where an antique trunk sat partially buried under a tarp. The smell of smoke was overpowering now, and Alex's hands shook as he lifted the tarp. The trunk was locked, but the rusted padlock looked fragile. Using a crowbar he found nearby, Alex pried it open with a loud snap. Inside were stacks of faded papers, photographs, and a small, leather-bound journal. The journal's cover was embossed with initials, BD. As he opened the journal, the temperature in the basement seemed to drop even further. The first few pages were filled with entries about film projects and personal musings, but then the tone shifted. The handwriting became erratic, the words scattered across the pages. "They're watching. I can't trust anyone. The money is hidden. It must stay safe." Alex's breath hitched. He flipped through the pages until he found the last entry, written just days before Donlevy's death. "If they find it, it's over. I'll take the secret to my grave if I must." A loud creak echoed behind him, and Alex spun around, his flashlight illuminating the empty basement. But it didn't feel empty. The air was thick with tension, the smell of smoke now suffocating. Then, from the shadows came a voice, quiet, strained, and filled with desperation. "You're close." Alex's flashlight flickered, the beam of light sputtering before plunging the room into darkness. The voice came again, louder this time, reverberating off the walls. "Find it, before they do." A sudden crash behind him made Alex drop the journal. As he fumbled to retrieve it, his hand brushed against something cold metal, buried beneath the papers in the trunk. He grabbed it, pulling out a small lockbox, its surface etched with strange symbols. The basement door slammed shut above him, and Alex's heart raced as he realized he wasn't alone anymore. Footsteps echoed around him, circling closer and closer. "Hurry," the voice whispered, now inches from his ear. "They're coming." Alex clutched the lockbox tightly, his fingers trembling against its cold surface. The symbols etched into the metal seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light, as if alive. The air around him grew thicker, heavier, as though the basement itself were holding its breath. The footsteps circling him stopped suddenly. Silence descended, a silence so oppressive that Alex could hear the frantic pounding of his heart. Then came the sound, soft at first, but unmistakable. The faint, rasping draw of someone inhaling deeply, followed by the slow exhale of cigarette smoke. "Who's there?" Alex croaked, his voice barely audible over the blood rushing in his ears. No answer, but the smell of cigarettes grew stronger, almost chokingly so. The flashlight in his other hand flickered again, its weak beam sweeping across the basement. For a split second, the light caught something someone standing just beyond the edge of the trunk. A figure, tall and shadowy, its outline hazy like smoke dissipating in the air. Alex stumbled backward, his breath hitching as the figure moved closer, slow and deliberate. The faint glow of an ember flickered where the figure's mouth should be, as though it were dragging on an invisible cigarette. "You shouldn't have come this far," the figure said, its voice low and gravelly, carrying an eerie familiarity. The lockbox felt like it was burning in Alex's hands, the etched symbols now pulsating faintly, as though responding to the presence in the room. The journal lay forgotten on the ground, its pages fluttering as an unseen force stirred the air. I'm trying to help," Alex stammered, gripping the lockbox tighter. He wasn't sure who he was talking to, the figure, the voice, or whatever unseen force seemed to be closing in around him. The figure paused, its smoky form shifting as if caught in an invisible breeze. Then it spoke again, the words sharp and urgent. "It's not just me you've awakened. They're watching now. They always were." Before Alex could respond, the lockbox in his hands gave a violent jolt, as though something inside was struggling to break free. The symbols on its surface glowed brighter, casting an eerie light that danced across the walls of the basement. Alex cried out, nearly dropping the box, but a sharp, metallic clang stopped him. The trunk's lid had slammed shut on its own, the sound reverberating like a gunshot. The ash trail on the floor began to swirl, forming strange, spiraling patterns that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the glowing symbols on the box. Suddenly, a loud pounding came from above, as though someone or something was trying to force the basement door open. Alex's head snapped up, the panic rising in his chest. The voice returned, louder this time, echoing all around him. "Open it or they'll take you instead." The pounding at the door intensified, each thud shaking the walls. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. Alex looked at the lockbox, his hands shaking so violently he almost couldn't hold it. Whatever was inside felt alive, pulsating with a rhythmic energy that seemed to sync with the pounding above. He glanced back toward the shadowy figure, but it was gone, dissipated into the smoky air. In its place, faint outlines began to emerge from the darkness. More figures, shifting and flickering like static on a broken screen. Their forms multiplied, surrounding him in a tightening circle, their hollow eyes fixed on the lockbox. Alex's fingers fumbled at the latch, desperate to open it and end whatever nightmare he had stepped into. But just as he began to pry it open, the basement door exploded inward, and a cold wind rushed down the stairs, extinguishing his flashlight and plunging the room into complete darkness. A voice no longer gravelly, but deep, guttural, and impossibly loud boomed from above. "You'll never leave if you do." Alex froze, the lockbox trembling in his hands, as something massive descended the stairs, each step shaking the ground beneath him. The thunderous steps stopped just as Alex felt the air grow impossibly still. He could hear nothing but his own panicked breaths and the faint hum of energy emanating from the lockbox in his hands. Whatever had come down the stairs now loomed just beyond his vision, its presence heavy and suffocating. The voice from before, now impossibly close, whispered with a venomous edge, "Choose." Alex's mind raced. Choose what? Open the lockbox or keep it sealed? Leave it behind and run? Or face whatever force was now cornering him in the dark? His instincts screamed at him to flee, but his gut told him there was no escape. Not now. Not anymore. Summoning every ounce of courage, Alex gritted his teeth and pried the latch of the lockbox open. The lid resisted at first, as if something inside was fighting him, but with a final, forceful pull, it flew open. The room was bathed in a blinding, unnatural light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Alex shielded his eyes, his heart pounding as a rush of heat and wind exploded outward from the box, scattering papers and debris across the basement. And then the screams began. They came from all around him, high-pitched, tortured wails that echoed endlessly in the confined space. The light dimmed, and Alex saw them. Shadowy figures clawing their way out of the walls, the floor, even the trunk. Their faces were twisted in agony, their hollow eyes locked onto the lockbox. Each one seemed to be drawn toward it, pulled by an unseen force, their translucent forms swirling like smoke in a cyclone. In the chaos, Alex's gaze fell to the contents of the lockbox. Nestled inside was a single, charred cigarette, its filter worn and its paper singed. Next to it lay a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Trembling, Alex reached for it, his fingers brushing against the brittle surface as he unfolded it. The paper held a single sentence, scrawled in a hasty, desperate hand. "Burn it, or become one of them." The figures around him surged closer, their anguished moans growing louder. Alex frantically looked around, his flashlight useless on the ground. His hands scrambled through the trunk's contents until they found an old matchbook, its faded logo barely legible. His fingers struck a match against the cover, and the small flame sputtered to life. Without hesitation, Alex touched the flame to the cigarette in the lockbox. The moment the fire kissed the paper, the screaming reached a deafening crescendo, and the shadows erupted into a violent whirlwind, swirling faster and faster before collapsing into the lockbox in a single, deafening roar. The lid slammed shut on its own, and the basement fell silent. Alex stood there, shaking, the match still burning in his hand. The air was heavy with the acrid smell of smoke, but it was different now, cleaner, as though something old and malignant had finally been extinguished. He looked down at the lockbox. It sat still and quiet, its glow gone, its symbols now dull and lifeless. Whatever curse had bound the house, whatever force had haunted it, seemed to be gone. Or so he thought. As Alex turned to leave, the faint smell of cigarette smoke returned, curling around him like an unwelcome embrace. From somewhere in the darkness, a gravelly voice whispered one final, chilling word. "Run. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story."